All right, everyone. It's about 1 after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the October edition of the Tableau user group for Denver. For those that are new, welcome. For those, I do see some familiar names and faces. If you're coming back, welcome back. I'm Greg, one of the co-leads for the Denver Tug. This month, as with every alternating month, we're doing more of a community forum style meeting, alternating back with more kind of a webinar content to more of a community forum, workshopping style event. And we've got a special guest that I'll introduce here in a second. Getting into what we'll talk about today. So I'll go through quickly some housekeeping and announcements for the group, and then jump into our community forum with our guest, Jen Shepard. I will leave a little bit of time open at the end for probably around 4 o'clock for networking. If you do want to hang out, totally optional. If you have questions about anything you're working on or problems, those are good places to ask those and get some advice from the community. So that'll be at the end. That won't be recorded. This portion of the first hour is recorded. If you want to have your cameras on, that's welcome. If you have questions, I'll monitor the chat for Jen while she's giving her presentation, and we can talk through those questions live. Otherwise, do try and stay on mute, and so we're not interrupting as Jen's presenting. Housekeeping and announcements. Just talked really about housekeeping. Announcement wise, really excited. Next month, the Denver Tug is hosting Kevin Flairlich of the Flairlich twins. I'm sure he loves always being associated with his brother. But super prominent in the Tableau community, does amazing work, is an incredible teacher and resource that's helped me a lot. With the work that he puts out there. So he'll be joining us for the full hour on the 5th, and that's just in advance of TC21, which he'll be presenting at as well. So no promises, but maybe we'll get a sneak preview of anything he's got going on in his TC talk. The link to register for that is not out yet, so this event will have to close out, but we'll put out a save the date and open up the registration, so you'll be able to sign up and join us for that event. And then segue into a plug for TC. TC21, again, virtual, same as last year, the 9th through the 11th, starting at 9 Pacific. Not a whole lot of information right now about what's going on in TC. They did put out some information to the Tug Leader channel on Slack in terms of some of the main events and speakers, which sounds like they're all going to be starting at that 9 a.m. Pacific time slot for each of the days between the keynote and Iron Viz, and then devs on stage. If you haven't been to TC before, I think we've got some new folks that are newer to Tableau. It's an awesome event, virtual or otherwise. You learn a lot, and definitely recommend registering. I'll throw a registration link in the chat if you haven't done that already. All right, and that is housekeeping. 4 minutes. So super excited to welcome to our Denver group, all the way from the Madison Tug, Jen Shepard, who has been involved with Tableau and DataViz since 2014. Super impressed. She's our first PhD speaker that I'm aware of anyway, for the Denver Tug this year, and works primarily with Wisconsin Department of Children and Families and the Arts Ed data project. And again, she's on the Madison Tug leadership team. Jen, I'll give the LinkedIn version of your bio, and then you can jump in with anything else. But again, super excited to have Jen here. She's going to talk through some of her work and kind of go through her process on one of her workbooks. So you're welcome to ask questions and learn from her work. And again, if you want to throw those in chat, Jen, I'll kind of jump in and prompt you with questions as they come in.
Perfect.
With that, I will hand it over to Jen.
Great. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Jen Shepard, and I'm really excited to be back with the Denver Tug, even if virtually. When I started my Tableau career in 2014, more than a couple of years ago, I was actually living in Colorado at the time. So my first Tug meeting was with the Denver Tug. In fact, the t-shirt I'm wearing today, I won as a swag giveaway at a Denver Tug meeting. So it's been a few years since I've lived there, but I always have a soft place in my heart for where my Tableau story started with you all in the Denver Tug. Greg, can you just confirm, please, that you're seeing my screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a non-traditional intro. I built this kind of ugly Venn diagram, but these are some of the things that I think are a little bit unique about me. So, you know, I use Tableau. I'm here at your Tableau meeting. Greg mentioned I do have a doctorate in social psych. I have worked in the nonprofit sector, the government sector, the academic sector, the private sector. I'm currently a contractor, so I've experienced a lot of different things. I would not say I'm using my PhD directly, but absolutely all of the data analysis skills and just understanding good research questions and how to answer those come into play every day, even when I'm doing data viz. A couple other fun facts about me. So my husband and I moved from Colorado specifically to be able to plant a vineyard. So you can see a picture from our property here in the corner. We have 6 acres of grapes that we planted by hand. We're hoping to start a winery in the next year or so. And we also have some goats. There's 3 Nigerian dwarf goats that are just pets, and they're a lot of fun. So I don't just do data viz, I'm also outside and doing gardening and things a lot as well. So I'm going to talk about one of my roles today. So as I said, I'm a contractor, and as Greg mentioned, I do work for the Department of Children and Families. But I'm going to talk about my work with my other project, the Arts Education Data Project. And Greg said that quite a few of you in the Denver Tug are related to education in one way or another. So hopefully a few of you are on the meeting today this is especially applicable to you. But even if you're not into education data, hopefully you'll still get something out of the Tableau side of this. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about one of the dashboards that I built for the state of Tennessee. Actually, all the states have the same dashboards. We'll be looking at Tennessee's data today. We have 16 states currently participating in the Arts Ed Data Project, meaning they have submitted data, they have live dashboards. We do have a few more who have signed agreements with us, who are working on compiling their data. That'll be coming soon. And the Arts Education Data Project is really just about taking the data that these states have about their schools. Usually it comes from the State Department of Education or Department of Public Instruction, whatever that entity is in the state. And then they send it to us. We standardize it, put it in our warehouse. We use Snowflake. And then we end up transforming that data into these interactive dashboards that the states make publicly available. And then we update the data annually as a new school year, a new year of school year data are available. So we've really helped these states be able to interact with their data and answer questions in ways that they weren't able to previously. They had the data, but they just didn't have the capacity in most cases to be able to analyze it in this way. We also have some national funders for this project, including the Country Music Foundation and Music Man and several others, who are really interested in seeing what this landscape of arts education looks like at a national level. So as we continue to add more states to the project, we're able to say more about what this looks like nationally. Even just with the states we have about 60% coverage of students in the country because we have some high population states like New York and California already providing data. We're hoping to get in with Texas and Florida soon. I do have to say, unfortunately, Colorado is not currently on our roadmap. So if any of you have an in with your State Department of Education and you think this sounds like a good project for you, we'd love to have you be part of what we're doing. Because the data that we receive from the states allows them and us to answer questions such as, what are the schools that are providing access to arts education? And what does that look like at the course level? So for example, does this school only offer courses in music and they don't offer anything in dance or in theater? We can say things about what does the student participation look like? What is the rate of participation or what types of students are participating? We can talk about arts teachers. We can talk about teacher to student ratios. We can talk about characteristics of the schools that have good arts programs or strong arts programs and those that don't. And our long-term vision is to be able to say things about the impact of arts education. We'd love to be able to link this up with other factors about the students, such as their graduation rate or attendance or things along those lines. So we're not there yet, but that's where we're hoping to get with this. I should also say that at this point, we're mostly concentrating on arts education, but we have started receiving data from some states in other program areas. So we have one state providing us with their physical education program data. And we have another state who's starting to get into social studies. So we do see this model expanding where states just don't have the capacity, as I said earlier, to really dig into their own data, and having a project like this where we can bring this framework to it and turn this data back to them and let them explore with it is really exciting for a lot of these states. These dashboards do have a pretty broad audience. So our main audience, I would say, are the states themselves, the kind of high-level administrators who are just really invested in seeing what this looks like in their institutions. But also our funders are really interested, of course, since they're providing the funding for this or some of the funding for this. But the dashboards are publicly available, meaning your average student could go take a look, or a parent, or a teacher, or the media, or researchers. So it really does have broad applicability. So that's kind of the project in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions if y'all have about the project, but I mostly just wanted to set the stage a little bit before we actually get into the dashboard. I did put the link to the project on here. I'm happy to throw that in the chat later as well. If you want to go out to our website, you can see a little bit more detail about the project. There's some relevant articles that we post on there, those kinds of things. But you are here for Tableau, so let's get into that. So I'm only going to be showing you one of the dashboards today. This project has resulted in a lot of different dashboards because we get a lot of data. As I said, we have a lot of audiences. But this one that I'm showing you today, I picked specifically because, one, it has a lot of different techniques used. So hopefully, even if you're a fairly experienced Tableau user, you'll still learn something new today. I know even after all the many years I've been using Tableau, I still learn new things all the time. And also because it's, I think, a decent blend of being an analytics dashboard, of a business type setting of dashboard, but with still some artistic flair to it. So I'll talk a little bit about those elements. So first, I'm just going to do a general demo of the dashboard, and then I'm actually going to get into some of the worksheets and talk through how some of these things were built. Please feel free to jump in with questions at any point. If there's something that I either explained too quickly or didn't explain at all that you want to hear more about, please go ahead and put that in the chat, and Greg will help alert me that you have a question. And then after I've gone through a couple of the charts, I'm not intending to go through everything, but if there's something I didn't talk about that you're really interested in, feel free to ask about that as well. And then, as Greg said at the end, if you all have questions about your own work, I'm happy to help provide support on that or feedback or whatever you'd like. So, okay, here's the dashboard. So there's kind of this upper quadrant where we've got the map, we've got a trend line, and we've got these more detailed views looking at the actual school level data. And then the bottom section is really focusing on each of the different discipline types. So across all the states, they offer different courses. Even within the same state, of course, they offer different courses. We group those up into these disciplines so we can say something in aggregate about music education, even if this particular course is being offered differs by grade level, by school, by state. So the color choices here and the icons are very consistently used across all of our dashboards. When people come to our dashboards, they know to associate theater with purple and dance with those dancing figures. So we use this iconography very regularly throughout our work. So these are not just random color choices here. You actually can see it reflected in our logo. So let me just go a little bit piece by piece. So at the top here, we just remind people what year we're looking at, tell them in the entire state, here's what that enrollment rate is of the arts, which means 68% of the total student population in Tennessee participate in the arts, which is pretty good. And that's 1,801 schools. For each of my dashboards, I have recently introduced what I call the help overlay. So people who are familiar with the dashboards, know where to click, what to do, they don't need to ever click on this button, they're good to go. But if you're coming here for the first time, maybe you're a parent or something, the help overlay kind of orients them to some things they can do with the dashboard. So you'll see that this is not the state of Tennessee. We just use one set of images for those. And yes, we know it's not consistent within a state, but that way we don't have to try to maintain more recent versions. And that's really not the point anyway. It's more these speech bubbles. So here we tell people that they can use some of these map tools. We tell them that they can actually use the map itself to become a filter and how to access the filtering. So this is achieved by using a show hide layout container and putting an image file in it. And then this show help and close help button is just added that opens up that container. I use the same technique with the filters. So instead of having our filters sit out all the time and take up real estate, this particular dashboard only has 2, but some of our other dashboards have a few more. And we find that just tucking them away like this is helpful for people who don't necessarily want to interact with the filters, they're not in the way, but if they do want them, they can go get them. So we do that same show hide layout container technique for that. And then the map is a map at the district level. So most of our dashboards, you can see here, there's quite a few of them for this project. Other dashboards are at the state level or digging into a discipline at a time. The whole purpose of this dashboard, and hence the name, is really to look at the district level. So I got a shapefile from the National Center for Educational Statistics. The state did not provide that. And then I was able to link up the state's data with that shapefile to be able to draw out the arts participation at the district level. Tennessee's kind of an interesting state with their districts. You see how there's a group, the larger, the kind of the surrounding area, and there's a tiny little district floating inside it, and they have several of those. Every state looks different. Some of them have a whole lot of districts, some have fewer, but we find that being able to look at this at the district level has provided a new level of insight that these states didn't have previously, to be able to see that geographically. So for example, you might notice there's this cluster of districts over here that are all in the lower arts enrollment rate. So there might be something interesting there of why that seems to be clustering together. I don't know the Tennessee geography well enough to even be able to hazard a guess as to why that might be, but that's something that the state themselves can then pick up on. Below that is just a trend line of what has the arts enrollment been over the last few years that we've gotten data for the state. And once we pick a district, then we'll actually be able to see the district level compared to the state level. This chart up here, the school majority race ethnicity. So I want to make sure I emphasize, it's not the race ethnicity of the students themselves, it's the majority in that school. So all of the schools in this top row where you see the header of Black means they attend a school where most of the students are Black. It doesn't mean that all the students in that school are Black, just that most of them are. So that's a really important distinction. And then below that, similar graph structure, but this one's looking at the free and reduced lunch participation. So this is also at the school level, and this is kind of a proxy measure for where we might have low-income families or low-income students. So if a school has a high proportion of its students who are eligible for the free or reduced lunch program, then that's considered a high poverty school or high. If they have very few students, specifically 25% or less of their students are eligible, then that's low. So we have all those defined on another dashboard, so it's not defined here, but that's what this chart is showing. And then below, as I said before, these are the different disciplines where we've grouped courses under them. And then we just give kind of some key statistics about that discipline. So how many schools actually offer at least one course in this discipline? How many enrollments are we talking about? And we use the word enrollments here deliberately because the same student could be in more than one course within the same discipline. And so we want to count that towards the discipline, number of unique courses and number of teachers teaching it. Okay, so let's start getting into the actual meat of this dashboard by picking a particular district. So we'll just pick Jackson County here. So the user would come in, they could either use the map or they could go up to the filters and they just pick one. Well, that one's pretty sparse. You know, I meant to plan my demo where I had an interesting district picked and I have forgotten which one I had in mind. This one's a little better. We'll start here. I can pick another one if we need a better example. So you can see that everything else on the dashboard has been affected by that selection. So now we actually have two trend lines. This particular district isn't too different from the statewide total. You can see they're a little below where the state was in the earlier years and actually had a nice surge in their enrollment for 2018 and exceeded the enrollment rate for the state. And now they're backtracking with them again. So some districts, maybe if I pick one of these in the orangish color, are noticeably lower than the statewide average. Yeah, here, very much lower. So that's useful context for people interested in this district. So they know not only is my rate low, but specifically how much lower is it than what this looks like at the state. And that's the point of these charts as well. So they're able to see what is the district average. So that's this blue line. It's only at 10% compared to the statewide, which as we saw earlier was 63. And they can see each of the individual schools. As it turns out, all of the schools in this particular district are majority white. Not every district is like that. And you can also see the spread for the two different free and reduced lunch eligibility rates. So they can hover over any dot to find out exactly which school it is, get that exact rate, and then they've got the comparison lines to see how that spread looks like. So you can see there's some schools down here in the 0% pulling that average down for that district. And then the numbers down here have all updated as well. So you can see that only one of the 7 schools in this district actually offers a dance course. They have 20 students in it, 1 teacher, makes sense. So that's the kind of higher level view. So now I thought I'd actually open up a couple of these worksheets and show you more specifically about how I built this. I'll just take a pause here and see if there are any questions so far.
Yeah, one question from Sharon Jen. What percentages of the bottom of the page within the categories of music, visual arts, theater, what are the percentages, excuse me, along the bottom?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Maybe it looks like
I did not.
Over time.
I failed to scroll all the way down. That's a great question. So those are just the trends over time for that particular discipline. So you can see if they suddenly started offering a discipline where they didn't before, or in this case with other, they had it for the first couple of years and then it looks like it dropped off pretty significantly. So those are just the trends over time within that discipline. I also didn't mention our footer here, I guess a little bit about how I help keep this work sustainable with so many different dashboards in so many different states. This is a worksheet, not just a text box. And I have a calculation in there that dynamically adjusts to the current year. So you see here this copyright 2021 Quadrant Research. Quadrant's my client for whom I built these dashboards. So that way, when we hit January 1st, 2022, this will dynamically adjust the next year. So nobody has to remember to come in here and update that. I highly recommend doing that type of thing as much as possible if you're not already doing it. That was one of the first things I did when I took over this project, was go automate as many things as possible, even the header, the title of what year this is, number of schools, all of that is dynamically set as well. Good question. Thank you for that, Sharon. I'm sorry, I forgot to scroll all the way down there. Okay, I will go ahead and show you a closer look at this chart. So a couple of techniques here. The basic chart structure is I have my measure, which in this case is the arts enrollment percentage, on columns. So that's what's deciding where the dot goes along this x-axis here. And then I have school name on detail. So that's going to give me a mark for each of my schools. And my mark type I have set to circle. So that's why we're getting these little circles. So that's the basic layout. And then the majority ethnicity field, so remember, not the student level, but the school level majority ethnicity, that's just a dimension in our data. So that goes on rows, which then forces a separate row for each of those groups as they apply to that particular district. Maybe I will clear out to a different one, so I can find one that's got at least 2. There we go. That's a much more robust example. Okay, so that's the basic chart structure, and then I put a couple of things in the tooltips. But then the other piece to this are these lines. So I achieved those using reference lines. So I built out a calculation that tells Tableau exactly which data rows I want it to consider to draw this line. So for my statewide, I'm saying I only want the state level data, regardless of which district's been picked, regardless of, I guess that's the difference. Regardless of the district, tell me what that value is at the state level. So that calculation is the statewide. Y'all can see just how many fields we have in here. And hopefully I've picked the right one. I'll show you this. So this is using, so a little messy. Hopefully I can talk you through it here in a way that makes sense. We have some potential data quality issues, and we also have the situation where I mentioned earlier where some students do take more than one course and we don't want to ever exceed 100%. So the first part of this calculation is basically just saying if this returns a result greater than 1 or 100%, just basically cap that off at 1. And then it's the same calculation again. I'll make this a little bit bigger here. So what I'm saying is fix on the majority ethnicity group. So say only accounting for majority ethnicity, I want you to take the total of arts enrollments divided by the number of school enrollments or total students in the schools of that same group. So ignoring district entirely, because I'm fixing it at the majority ethnicity. So then I'm creating my own percent at the level that I want it to. That's what a level of detail calculation does. And then we do need to take the year into account. So I could potentially have put year in my calculation, but I chose to show it as a filter and just make it a context filter so it applies earlier in the order of operations. I guess one thing I maybe should have asked is, generally speaking, are you all beginner Tableau users or advanced or somewhere in between? So hopefully this isn't way over everybody's head, but if you are newer to Tableau, maybe this just starts to get you thinking about another use case for a level of detail. If you're a bit more of an advanced user, hopefully this is making sense. Again, happy to answer questions at any point. Also, I don't want to belabor anything, so I will keep moving on, but stop me if you want to go back. So that's what this is just saying, what is that statewide enrollment rate for these different groups? And then that calculation goes on detail, and then I can use it to actually draw out these reference lines. If I can get my mouse to click the correct thing here. There we go. We'll edit that so you can see how it's used. So I want to draw a line per cell, which in this case is per row. Instead of, I don't want just one big line across my whole chart. I want it for every one of my groups, my race ethnicity groups. So I referenced that field that I was just showing you. And then I did a custom tooltip, so I can just say the statewide value is this. And then I do want this to recalculate for selected data points. If somebody were to do a sub-selection, I wanted that to adjust. And then I did the exact same idea, just a slightly different calculation to get that at the district level. And then I put that on as a separate reference line to be able to show what that looks like at the district. So I can just show that one real quick too. A better approach to get to the right calculation. Nope. There we go. Okay, district total. I completely admit I'm not the most organized of people with my Tableau workbooks. I try, it's something I'm getting better at. I have started using foldering, so we just have so many fields, but this is an area that I aim to improve in. So the difference with this calc and the one we just looked at is it has this additional piece of the district. In this case, I'm using a set. So it says, also take into consideration the district that's been selected, and then tell me what that enrollment is for the entire district for that majority race group and calculate that percent for me. So basically the same calc, just also including that district piece. So then I get the district level. And then again, each particular dot is one school. Okay, one other thing I wanted to point out about this viz. So you might notice the word schools here. So that's a little bit of a technique or maybe even a trick, depending on how you think of it. I wanted people to know how many schools we're talking about. Yeah, sometimes it's just one dot and that's pretty obvious, but sometimes the dots stack up on each other because they have exactly the same value. And so I wanted people to know how many schools are actually in this view, even if they can't see all of them. So I brought in what would have been a measure, but I converted it into this attribute pill and made it discrete so that it would just put the number in as if it were a new column, so that I could have that number of schools there. And then the trick part is I just created an entirely new calculation just by clicking in here. So you saw I just double clicked. Maybe video might be lagged a touch. So I double clicked and it opens up a new pill for me. And you can put anything you want in there. You can start typing the name of an existing field if you know it. Or what I did here is I just used quotation marks to make a string variable and I wrote the word schools. So I'll just put the word test here now so you can see it, or our test with my typo, that's okay. And it just adds it as another column. So that's how I was able to label my number of schools. And I just really liked the distinct separation of the number from the word. I like how they really line up cleanly. So that's why I chose to do that as another pill. So again, maybe a little bit of a trick you hadn't seen before. I like to use that sometimes when I'm trying to put something numeric out here that's related to the chart but isn't part of the chart. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you for that graph. Any questions about that one?
Nothing in the chat.
Either people are completely overwhelmed, or hopefully most of you are just following along. You're like, looks good, Jen. Feel free to throw a looks good, Jen, my way if you want. That would be appreciated. All right, next, let's talk about this map. So there's a couple of neat things going on here. So I told you already that it uses a shapefile. So I just joined the shapefile to the data view. So again, our data are in Snowflake. So I have a materialized view from Snowflake. I joined the shapefile to it on an ID that they have in common. So there's a district ID basically. And then that's how I was able to color the districts by our data values. So a couple of things happening here to point out. So you might have noticed that this little icon shows up when a district is selected. And I could have just had people click on a district and had Tableau's default behavior. The filtering piece is just default dashboard action, nothing particular tricky there. But what I don't like about that is if you click one thing on a map, you've probably experienced this too, it shades everything else out. It all fades to this other color, not quite gray, but kind of a faded version. And then the thing you selected stands out a little bit. But I wanted people to still have that context of what are the surrounding district rates or what does the map look like in entirety. I just wanted them to also be able to see what they selected. So I used this technique where I made a calculation. That's just an ASCII character. So if you aren't already using ASCII characters in your text, you absolutely should. You have lots of things at your disposal. Jeff Schaefer is one person I know who has blogged about this a bit on his site, Data Plus Science, where he talks about how you can just plug ASCII characters, paste them in as text fields, and Tableau will render it. You can have emojis, there's all kinds of stuff, but I used just an ASCII character for that. So I called this selected district. So my district selector is actually a set because I didn't want to filter the other districts out of the view. I just wanted them to be able to pick one. And so my calculation, let me up the size on this. My calculation says if this district is the one that's in my set, so if it's been selected, and this was an important part, I didn't want all the districts to get that little symbol when they hadn't selected anything. Because remember, the default view of this map is to show all the districts. So I didn't want them to all get the mark. So if there's only one member in the set, and this district is that same one that has been selected, then give me this little character. And that character is just hold down the Alt key, and then it's 31. So I just hit Alt 31, and it just made that character. Or Alt, I think 30. I do not have all of these memorized. Alt 30 is up, 31 is down. Those are the only two I have memorized. Nope, I take that back. 14, I think, is music notes. Yes, music notes for 14. There's a whole bunch of them. I'll be happy to share my go-to ASCII character resource with you all if that would be helpful. So yeah, that's the calculation. So if it's in the set and there's only one thing in the set, give me this character. And then I just put that on my labels shelf so that when something is selected, it pops this symbol onto the selected district. So I thought that was a pretty good trick to be able to indicate what's been selected without fading everything else out. The other half of this technique of keeping things from fading out is this highlight blocker technique. I absolutely cannot take credit for this one. I do not remember where I first saw this. I've seen a few people use it. It's brilliant. And I would wish I could give credit to where I first saw it, but I just don't remember. But that default behavior of Tableau to fade everything else out instead of the one thing you picked, you can get around that by basically making a highlight action and highlighting everything in your viz. And so if everything's highlighted, then basically nothing is highlighted. So it's sort of a reverse psychology technique, but it works really well. So all I have is a field. It doesn't really matter what it is. I think mine is just an empty quote bracket. Yeah, it's just a calculation. It doesn't really matter what it consists of. So I just have some empty quotation brackets. And I just put that calculation on detail. Doesn't do anything yet. But then on the actual dashboard, when I go to my dashboard actions, I added a highlight action for this particular worksheet, my map. And I said, I want you to highlight based on this highlight blocker field. So it's achieving this purpose of highlighting the whole thing. So then when I click on it, it doesn't only highlight part of it. I don't know if that's making total sense, but it definitely works in action. So here, if I take it off, or maybe I'll take off the whole, I'll just remove the whole filter and then put it back. Or I'm sorry, the whole action and put it back, and you'll see what it does. So if I don't have that, there you go. So the one thing I click on gets highlighted and everything else fades behind. But as I said earlier, it's really hard to tell what color those are. Now, you can kind of get a sense, but it's certainly not clear. But with that highlight blocker, then it keeps that behavior from happening, which I really liked. So there you go, another trick for your toolbox. Hopefully that comes in handy for you someday. Okay, a couple more things I wanted to share. So this section with the disciplines down here, I achieved this look. So you've got this real consistency across the 5 disciplines. I've got this symbol, I've got these big numbers, I've got this trend. This is made possible mostly through the use of containers. So each of these 3 pieces for every discipline, the symbol and title, the numbers, and the trend, those are 3 separate worksheets that are all put into a container together. So let me just select this container. So there's the container for other. So you see those 3 pieces in there. So each of the 3 worksheets have no color to the worksheet. And instead, I've colored the container itself. The container is colored yellow in this case, which is our color for other. So there's that. And then for this banding color that you see across here, I achieved that by coloring the background of that particular object on the dashboard with white, but giving it a low value of opacity. So it's 70% transparent, 30% opaque, which gives it just that little bit of extra contrast. If I bump this up to a higher value, let's go way up here to 76, it'll start to look more and more white. So that's personal aesthetics of, trying to clear this, personal aesthetics of what value to pick. I'm going to unselect it. There we go. So you can see it stands out a lot more now. I liked the look of it at 30, could have done any value. I just thought that helped offset those numbers a little bit. As I said earlier, gave a little bit more of an artistic element to what's basically an analytics dashboard. And it also helps with readability, I think, especially on this yellow background. It makes that text pop out a little bit more. So that's how I did that banding. And then I will also mention, I said I'm trying to get better about the way I organize and name my sheets and all of that, which is absolutely true. But one thing that has been really helpful, especially in a workbook like this, where I have 12 different dashboards, each with multiple sheets, I definitely use the color tabs. And if anybody in Tableau land is listening, I would really love for you to allow more colors here. We've had these same 8 options for, I think, the entire 8 years I've been using Tableau. So if we could have some more colors, that'd be really helpful. I had to double up on purple and blue because I didn't have enough. But anyway, I do use these colors. So I color all the worksheets that go on that dashboard and that dashboard with this color, which makes it useful if I'm trying to apply something to multiple sheets. I can more quickly see which ones go with that dashboard. I also use naming conventions. So every sheet on this dashboard starts with DL for district level. My trends over time, they all start with TOT. So some things like that I find just make my life a lot easier to sort out what goes where. If I add a new sheet to my workbook, which hopefully we're not adding any more sheets to this workbook, I try to follow the same convention. So that's just a little organization tip from someone who's not especially organized, but I try. And I think those were the main things I wanted to go through. So I'll check again, see if anyone has questions about either what I did present or if there's something on the dashboard I didn't cover that you would like to talk about. Please speak up. I'm here hopefully for you all to learn something. I'll take a drink while I wait.
We did get a few call outs for it. It looks great, which it does.
Hey, thank you.
Some requests for sharing some of the resources you mentioned. Don't see any new questions. Yeah. Which, yeah, I'll plug that as well. That was, and I'll just generally say this was awesome, and there's the full spectrum, I think, of things we can take away in terms of level of detail calculations all the way to tab colors and things that are more practical. The ASCII and the Unicode has been something that I've done more recently that's been super useful and helpful in terms of getting a little bit more visual context into some of the values on there. So I would plug that as well.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to share that. I'm sure there are many other resources too. I'll just share the one that I tend to use because I find it laid out pretty nicely, but it's not a full list of all the different text fields Tableau will accept. So those ones are, you're able to create them yourself using just the keyboard. There are other ones, the ones Jeff Shaver talks about, where if you find them somewhere, you can just copy them and paste them. I don't know how you make them. So there's two different types, or at least two different types, I should say. Yeah, great. I'm glad this seems helpful. I have a lot in here, and again, I'm happy to go through other things if it would be helpful, but I also don't want to just overwhelm people on a Friday afternoon. So if that's all y'all want to talk about, then happy to see if there's anything we can help you with. Also happy to show a couple of the other dashboards if there's interest in that, if any of you education people are in here, or if you're just an arts lover. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was in band, I was in drama. I didn't really dance, but I've got band and drama. Oh, I took an art class once, a painting class. So I also just like the art personally, which is why this has been such a fun project to work on.
For sure. I was curious what the other category is. Like what might be an example of that?
The other dashboard?
No, the yellow other. Like what?
Oh, other.
What are your other categories of arts?
It definitely depends on the state. So some states, that's where they put their media arts. So it might be things like graphic design or designing digitally or whatever those types of courses are called. Some states, I think, put some of their more theoretical, like art history kind of courses in there. I'm trying to think what else falls in there. It's those kinds of courses that tend to be classified as other.
Does the dash filter on those categories here? I'd be curious, like if there's an other that's a little bit more specialized, I would have a guess that you probably offer a lot. You're probably on the higher percentage of overall in terms of your district in terms of supporting the arts. But
yeah, that's a good question.
I don't have the data.
That particular dashboard doesn't. We have this other one called the Course Finder, where you can see which schools offer which courses. So let me just filter down to only the others. And oh, look at this cluster. Yeah, see, you'll find such interesting patterns when you're investigating the data. So for whatever reason, this cluster of schools down here tends to offer other courses. I just wanted to see what this course list looks like for this state when we only look at others. So art history, so I mentioned that one. Oh, theory, music theory. I will say this is another of a data quality thing. So we do try to point out things to the states as we notice them, but ultimately they're the experts in their data. And if they tell us that this is an other discipline, even if I might have thought AP drawing maybe would have gone with visual arts, we go with what they do. They're the owners of their data. So some of these I would have thought might have gone under another category, but I do see some courses here I would have expected. Art history, music history, art, 2D art and design, maybe. So yeah, that's what these courses are in the state.
Very cool. We did have a question from Tony, and you guys feel free to come off mute if you do have more questions. Have you had any feedback from states or districts that have helped you evolve the dashboards?
Yes, absolutely. So we meet, we're not quite on a quarterly schedule, but we're trying to meet more regularly with our stakeholders, which includes the states who currently participate, the states who have said they're interested but maybe haven't submitted data yet, and funders when they're able to make it. And we talk about what questions do they have about arts in their state that are not being answered currently. In fact, that's where this dashboard came out of a stakeholder meeting where they said, these other dashboards are great, but I'm having a really hard time just narrowing in on which courses are offered, and I need to see that. So we built this entire dashboard to meet that need. The district level one we were just looking at, I showed them an early version of this. They were really excited about it. They had asked for something at the district level, loved the map, but I didn't yet have just some of these overall numbers. So I'm pretty sure this total number of schools was an add from something that they said. They said it's kind of hard to just count all the dots, which of course in retrospect, that I wish I'd have caught that sooner, but they're a great group to work with. And so we were able to add this overall count. I don't remember if I had the counts in these or not. I think I did. I think I had them in the graph, but then they're having to do the math of adding these different columns up. Some districts are much larger than others, so it was easy just to put that number, the total for them up in the header. So things like that have definitely come from hearing from our stakeholders. Mostly they give us feedback in those big group settings. Occasionally we'll get a state when we load their new year of data, they'll say something like, wow, until I saw this dashboard, I didn't realize that we had maybe an issue in this area. And now I want to be able to know more about that. Can you give me a list of which schools this is? So here you can see these clusters, but unless you hover over each and every one and can manage to get your mouse on each and every one, you can't easily tell which schools are doing really well in this case, or sometimes if there's a cluster at the other end, they wanted to be able to see that. So we love getting questions like that from our stakeholders, and absolutely the things that they ask us for make these better. There's been a lot of iterations over the years. This project's at least 15 years old over the years from our stakeholders of being able to offer them entirely new views or just add little enhancements to something we've already built to more better serve their needs.
Awesome. And we've had a few comments on beginners, and just to carry on to that thread of the readability on the dots one, maybe lesser known, it's actually not an available formula when you write a calculation in Tableau, but for these that tend to have more points, I've started using the random formula, which you have to actually kind of do what Jen said and actually create that yourself. But it's just the word random and then parentheses, and it creates a random number, and then you kind of get some dispersion of those dots.
Oh, jitter.
Within the columns there. The jitter, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I have used that, I think it's on the welcome dashboard. I have used that in some other views. For this particular one, because they really need to know which lane it falls in, I could experiment. That's actually a great idea. I could try jittering them more, but I didn't want them to think this school was actually in a different group because it's right on the border. So I'm gonna have to experiment more with row borders or something like that. But yeah, you're right, I could explore jittering. I did that for this view that we're looking at here, where we're just looking at the overall enrollment by course, by discipline. And the spread horizontally has no meaning. The vertical is that course enrollment number. But if I hadn't spread them, then you see here, a lot of these courses have the same enrollment, or essentially the same. They would have all just stacked on top of each other, and you wouldn't have been able to see that. So I used the index in this case. I used the index calculation to spread those apart. And yes, that can be very helpful to get some separation between your data points so people can actually get their mouse on there and get to the exact value. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, for sure. I had a question from Angela, and Angela, feel free to come off mute to clarify, but is it hard to upload the logo to your dashboard? I'm not sure if it's the overall logo in the title or the logos in your for your different segments.
Not hard, no. So this logo is just an image file, and it's just floating on each of our dashboards. So I designed it, and then we had a graphic designer person finesse it with the transparent background and getting the font exactly right and all of that. So it's just an image file, and it just floats out here. The icons are also individual image files that I use with the shape function in Tableau. So I'll show that one in just a second. So this is just a floating image. Getting it in the right spot and trying to fit it, that was the hard part, because we already had a lot of content on here before we decided to add the logo. But yeah, it's just an image file that lives on my computer where Tableau also lives, and I let Tableau size it. A pro tip in terms of performance, the more closely you match your file size to the size you want it to be on your dashboard, the better your performance will be. Ours is just a little bit bigger, I think, than we ultimately ended up having space for. But if you have a huge image file and bring it in and tell Tableau to render it small, that actually takes a lot of computing power. So while we're on the subject of images, I'll just mention that. And then the icons, I created those in PowerPoint, saved them each individually. And then for the worksheets, Now this one's a little extra complicated because I ended up putting them in their own kind of placeholder columns. But the point is, it's the shape mark type, and then each discipline is assigned a shape. So I just use the correct shape for that discipline. And yeah, as I said, these are used everywhere. Pretty much every dashboard we have for this project has either the color, the icon, or both. It's definitely a branded element.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and if you weren't aware, you can add custom. It's in your, there's a shapes folder in the in your like desktop directory, and you can just add any icons that you want, and then match those up in desktop.
Yes, custom color palette too. So I have this saved as a color palette so that I can just quickly apply it without having to put in the 6-digit code every time. That saves a lot of time as well.
Hopefully that answered your question, Angela.
Yes, it did. Thank you. I think this is
welcome.
amazing. I'm still starting to learn Tableau, so this is really great visuals. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I threw in another question. Would we be able to watch this recording of the TUG session later?
Yep, this will be recorded, so we'll share this out after the meeting, so you get a link, and then it'll be posted in the community page for the Denver TUG. Any other questions? Don't have any more in chat. Any more questions for the group? All right. Well, thank you again, Jen. This was super useful to me, and it sounds like from others in the group who are just starting out. Like I said, we will share out the recording if you want to go back and look at any of this. Jen, is this available on public by chance?
Not on, well, it is on Tableau Public currently, but we kind of keep it hidden. But if you go to artsed.org, then we just switched to a new website. I was going to say there is a map that has the states contributing, and the intention is to have those link out to each of the states so you can get to their pages. I'm not sure if that's been built in. So I'm going to paste in the chat right now the ASCII resource, and I will also paste just to one of the state's websites. They all pretty much have the same content, just a couple little nuances to each state. So that way you can at least get to one of them if you were inclined. Alt codes, cool. I should say. I keep saying ASCII characters when I think I mean alt code. All right, let me put that in here.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is in the chat. Again, a reminder for next month on the 5th, we'll be hosting Kevin Flaherty, so you'll see information on that come through email soon on how to register. But super excited to be hosting Kevin. And then if you haven't already, register for TC. It's a good time, especially for beginners. I went to TC within my first 6 months of starting to use Tableau, and it was super helpful just to meet people and be a part of the community. And there's a lot of free content and courses and things that you can learn from. So do register for that if you haven't already. And Jen, I think you're going to hang out maybe if people do have more questions on anything that they're seeing, but I will share, and I'll throw a registration link for TC in the chat. If you guys want to hang out and you have questions about work, we'll hang out for a bit. If you want to get on with your Friday or your weekend, you can also do that as well. Thanks for coming.